Finance Minister's announcement that an additional surcharge of 3% on those earning above 2 crore rupees and 7% on those earning above 5 crore rupees was met with a host of reactions on budget day. The public reactions mostly welcomed the move. After all, it only seems fair that the super rich chip in more in a country where such a large number of people live below the poverty line. There were murmurs of discontent, questioning why honest taxpayers should be penalized just because they make more money. On Monday, these murmurs turned into a roar, coming largely from the realization that the new tax limits will also impact foreign portfolio investors and capital gains tax on equity investments. The Sensex closed nearly 800 points down as this class of investors reacted sharply. When the finance minister was asked whether there would be a clarification of the super rich tax, here's what she said.
This is a question which I'll probably have to answer in the parliament too. The session is on, and therefore I'd rather do it if I have to do it in the parliament rather than saying it out now. I don't think clarification at the moment is all that required. Let's see as it goes.
All right, so now while just 1,500 to 2,000 FPIs, that means foreign portfolio investors who have organized themselves in a way where they're taxed as individual entities may be affected by this new tax, there are about 50,000 taxpayers all over who may be impacted. But here's the crux of the debate. Should any class of taxpayers be disproportionately penalized for creating wealth, or is it only fair in a country like ours? Joining us on the debate today are Dr. Radhika Pandey, consultant at the NIPFP, Deepak Shenoy, founder of Capital Mind, Feroz Aziz, Deputy CEO of Anand Rathi Private Wealth Management, and Nishit Desai, founder of Nishit Desai Associates. Welcome to all of you and thank you for speaking with us today. Deepak, let me start with you and ask you where you stand on this basic debate. Also tell us what you think has spooked the FPIs and markets to this extent today.
Evening, Tamanna. I think the markets haven't spooked perhaps, but it's not really the FPIs yet, because we saw data coming later in the evening that said that the net sales of foreign portfolio investors was only 400 crores, which is not significant in terms of them having caused the sell-off. It's probably by others who thought they were spooked more than anything else. But on the issue of the FPIs getting taxed, I believe this is a very incongruent thing. Now, we have Indian institutions such as insurance companies and mutual funds who can buy and sell in the market and they do not get taxed. A foreign institutional investor, on the other hand, can come to India and does not get the same level playing field and gets taxed. And this started very recently because we renegotiated Mauritius, we renegotiated Singapore, we enforced that the Indian taxes would apply on foreign institutions, which are essentially mostly, say, mutual funds or hedge funds located outside India. So I think that's a little disproportionate. What's happened already that they are getting taxed, whereas institutions in India are not, has exacerbated to a point where they're getting charged about 40% more now than they used to be, or 30% more than they used to be. So there's a fundamental, there's a point at which people will say India is an emerging market, but if we tax them too much, we may still remain an emerging market for them and not really progress any further. So there is a need for us to rationalize that perhaps, but it goes beyond this 37% surcharge and on the taxation in general. That's my opinion.
Okay, let me come to the crux of the issue and the debate really, and I'll come to Radhika on this, should this category of taxpayers be asked to pay more, taking their effective tax rates to above 40%, some of the highest in the world? Do you think there is a justification for that at this point?
So actually, you see, there's a class of investors. On the one side, we are making the budget more foreign investment friendly by initiating a number of reforms for inviting foreign portfolio investors. And on the other side, there are some complications in tax. So as the earlier speaker pointed out, it leads to quite a disproportionate taxation. Coming to the super rich category, if we look at the overall taxpayer profile of the country, there are hardly 6 6,351 taxpayers who have taxable income above rupees 5 crore. So on the one side it raises the tax rates, but it's doubtful whether it makes significant contribution to the tax revenue on that front.
No, so Nishit Desai, it's not about significant contribution alone, is it? It's also about sending out a message. And is that message what we should be talking about? That the super rich should contribute more?
Well, I think you hit on the nail. I happen to be one of those victims of so-called super rich. I'm one of the highest tax paying professional for quite some time consistently. And unfortunate part is that we were hoping that we'll be given special treatment, something else, which will honor us in some way. And here we are settled with a significant amount of increase in the tax rate, which also upset first of all our liquidity. We had not planned for it. Number two, that if you see world over, the tax rates have come down to a reasonable level, and particularly in the developing countries or emerging markets where there are a lot of inefficiencies, there is no reciprocal benefit to the taxpayer. For example, in UK, US, Scandinavia, you have all education free in Scandinavia. Healthcare benefits are there. We have nothing here, And number two, that suddenly it is not only 41 or 42% tax, it actually can go as high up to 50-60% as well. If I am a shareholder of a private company, let's say, and first of all, company will pay 25% tax, then there is 20% dividend distribution tax on the balance amount if it is distributed. Then you take money in your hands, you pay 41%, so it goes to 50% with dividend distribution tax, which is effectively dividend tax on the shareholder. And on the top of it, nowadays there are so many disallowances which are artificial. For example, if I own a second flat and if I pay interest on the loan that I borrowed, there is no deduction. So there is disallowance of legitimate expense that I am incurring. Number two, that when you delay payment in tax or otherwise for whatever reason, you are charged with 1% per annum as in interest. On the other hand, when government delays giving us our refund, they only pay us 6% or half the amount, and the first one 12%, which is again non-deductible. So there are lots of unreasonable provision in income tax and inefficiency in the system, which really takes our tax slab to a level beyond 50%. And sometimes, in fact, I began to wonder, are we going back to bad socialist days? Because, super rich are considered to be, something not contributing. We are willing to, today super rich have been contributing a lot. I think some of those things, we think that it's very unreasonable to suddenly inflict us with this kind of taxation.
I want to thank you for your candor, Mr. Desai, because this is not a very popular view, and you've come out and put it straight. The contradictory point of view would be, do your bit as an Indian citizen. Feroz, where do you stand on this debate? Are we talking only to the super rich here this evening?
No, I think Tamanna, see, maybe I am also one of the victims, but let me tell you one point of view. See, there are three things which are very critical to consider. One is, of course, the super rich is contributing. 0.1% of the total taxpayers are paying more than 12% of total direct tax collection. If this is not contributing, then what is? 0.1%, 50-60,000 people above 2 crore category are contributing a reasonably 10 to 12 or even more kind of direct tax contribution. 0.1 as against 10, that's 0.1. Point 2 which I want to make is, there is a double taxation here. It is not just single taxation. The point to be noted is, it's not the slab which has gone up, it's the surcharge which has gone up from 15 to 37%. What happens in this is, it is not just the salary income or any professionals that year income which is being taxed. Investments are also being taxed at a higher rate. So once a person pays that 42.74% tax, then after having paid the tax, he or she needs to be on parity with the rest of them for the savings. So if you're first going to tax him more or her more, and then also going to tax him more on the investments, it seems like double taxation. Third, I think, of course, like Radhika rightly pointed out, it's just about 3,300 people above the 5 crore limit, and about 40-50,000 between 2 and 5 crores. It's a small audience. Of course, they should contribute in a country which is so diverse. Point 3, which I would like to make is that when you speaking of taxation, I think increasing the slab would have definitely been a very good idea, so that there is some parity. Otherwise, what's going to happen is people are going to create trusts, private trusts they will create to bifurcate their incomes. They will try and move their domicile. I'm sure quite a few people are already over the weekend. I spoke
Feroz,
to
there is no doubt in my mind
a small
that
group of people who were part
Feroz,
of this, and they would definitely consider.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that people will find some loophole. The Indian accounting system gives itself to that kind of creativity, so there will be loophole. Now, since I'm surrounded by the super rich this evening, let me put the contrarian view. Deepak, don't smile. I know you're in that category as well, I assume. Let me put the contrarian view. And this, you know, no government wants to be seen as going easy on the super rich. Is it not only fair? Most people watching this, most people you know possibly will not really feel bad for someone who makes more than 2 crore rupees a year or 5 crore rupees a year. Looking at our poverty levels, don't you think that in terms of a contribution, this should be done happily and willingly? I'm just going to pull up also for our viewers what Babul Supriyo tweeted today. Union Minister, about the whole taxation structure. Of course, there was a lot of response to him. But let me put that question to you, Deepak. Is it not fair that you give a little more?
Well, I would have said it would, it's nice if it mattered, but in the whole scope of things, this is 10,000 crores. My calculation is the above 5 crore population is going to contribute about 6,300 crores, and 3,800 crores will come from people who are between 2 and 5 crore in salaries. This is based on a 20% growth from 2017, which is data I have. Even then, I've had conversations with 3 people in the last 2 days who are moving from a personal business where they had all their profits and to setting up a private limited company, which will then have all these profits because they were running a business anyway. These are people who have 10 to 20 crores of profits and were paying 36% till last year, and now we'll move it to a private limited company where they will pay 29%, which is a 13% reduction compared to 42% if you're paying personally. They didn't see this as a big deal last year. They said they were paying 7% extra. They are now doing it because it's 13% extra. You can demand that the rich pay a little more, but how much? At some point, you're looking at a differential that says every incremental rupee I make above 5 crores, 2/5 of that is going to the government, or nearly half of it is going to the government. Why should I even bother? If I should bother, then I will find a loophole and I will move to a lesser taxation rate. I believe all of us should contribute, but I think it should be a little more fair. We demand a lot of services perhaps, and a lot of those services are not forthcoming. We've had floods in Bombay since 2005, where the super rich live. Most of the super rich in India live there, and yet we have floods which debilitate that city almost every year. And at some point, richest municipal corporation, why doesn't it spend and do anything with all that money it has? And why are you asking us to pay more in general, without trying to find loopholes? I first of all believe
Deepak,
people would pay more.
You have a great point, but then let me bring it back to its 50,000 odd people. Every salaried middle class employee will also feel the same. Whatever they pay possibly pinches them even more. And today they're asking, what did we get? I want to bring in Madhavan. Madhavan, welcome to the conversation. I saw a piece that you wrote where you say that this goes against the grain of rewarding the Kamdar versus the Namdar, and you make a case for that if you want to raise revenues, why not bring some sort of an inheritance tax instead of a super rich tax. I don't know if anyone on the panel will agree with you, but put your theory forward, please.
I think there is an underlying morality in this whole Kamdar versus Namdar debate. May I tell Ms. Inamdar that? Actually, the point is that inheritance is something that you do not earn, whereas a salary, howsoever high, in exchange for work done, is something that you earn. So, if we believe that we in the work ethic, and let's say I am giving hypothetical situations of, let's say, a software architect in Bangalore, or a space scientist, or a pharmaceutical R&D expert who has a high value patent to his credit. These are not inheritors, and if they deserve to be rewarded for hard work, management, intellectual property, in that case I think they deserve the money they have. On the other hand, an inheritance tax is by definition something that you do not earn, and therefore it is more progressive from a social perspective of egalitarianism to tax inheritance. Obviously, nobody likes taxes. I mean, I don't like taxes, you don't like tax, but we'll have to accept the fact that some kind of progressive taxation in which the richer people or the less deserving gets taxed as opposed to more deserving people or the poorer people. That is something that we need to arrive at a consensus as a country, as a nation. But excessive taxation, even if it is progressive, is not recommended, and the surcharge that has been put in falls in that category. Having said that, I must also say that I do have something against loopholes being used, where, you know, capital gains taxes based on trading positions are, you know, used to increase incomes while there is no broad market participation in the rally. To that extent, if there is a manipulative element to taxation, then the taxman, or in this case taxwoman, has a right to frown. But in principle, taxing wealth that is inherited is better than taxing well-deserved.
It's an interesting idea. I want to see if does anyone want to come in with comments on Madhavan's proposal. Feroz, you want to come in on that?
Yes. Yeah, Tamanna, I think, of course, till 1984, India had inheritance tax of almost 85%. So, right, Madhavan, like we mentioned, that if it's luck element which got you the wealth, you definitely can pay a portion of that. I think every 2-3 generations, to make sure that there is tax, I would definitely vouch for it. In fact, the Super HNI was ready to do it. If you're taxing a person beyond his lifetime, that's a very, very profitable thing, especially because in 2014, wealth tax was abolished. I think that was, is the precursor to bring back inheritance tax, because if you're not going to tax an X person 1% every year for the next 30 years, when it's a certainty that that person will be no more, because we all have a finite life, when he is not there, taxing him 20, 30, 40%, like globally it happens, is a very good idea. Like UK has the steepest inheritance tax. Of course, US has inheritance tax, but has very large gift limits of $11 million in a lifetime. So, having inheritance tax along with gift tax limits is what will make sense. If you just bring in inheritance tax without gift tax, then somebody on the deathbed will just gift everything and inheritance would be zero. So, to make sure that there are no loopholes, like Madhavan's mentioned, you will have to bring in inheritance tax and bring the gift tax or a limit on the gift, which is what happens globally, at least in the emerged markets.
You know why I want to explore this idea in more detail, because a lot of policy announcements cannot be devoid with how they will be accepted by people, and there is a political consideration to this. So Radhika, I am coming to you with a slightly tough question. An inheritance tax would be deeply unpopular. A super rich tax will be hailed by most people, only 50,000 out of which I think 4 are here will be upset about it. Everyone else will, cheer it on, saying that these super rich, let them give more money. But an inheritance tax would be difficult for any government to implement. That is why the super rich, in that sense, become low-hanging fruit.
Right. No, actually, I think that, inheritance tax is a good idea in the sense that if you look at all the canons of taxation, what are the principles of good taxation? any kind of tax which adversely impacts your incentive to work is bad. So if we are taxing super rich and excessively so, and that too through non-transparent measures like surcharges and all, so I think as an alternative, and an inheritance tax would be a better idea, though it will be unpopular. But if you look at public finance principles and economic principles, from that point of view, at least it would be better, because it doesn't adversely affect the incentive to work, and in that sense it would be a better proposition. In fact, I would like to add one more point, that there is entire need for rationalization of tax structure and looking at things that which are exempted. So what is important is to have a closer look at things which are currently subject to exemptions. Agricultural income are subject to exemptions. So there is a need to rationalize those elements also of the tax policy in order to avoid excessive burden of taxation being paid by the super rich.
Radhika, you're talking about something which maybe logically, theoretically, but realistically, I cannot think of a government which will say, okay, let's spare the super rich and tax farmers, even if they happen to be super rich. So, Mr. Desai.
Absolutely right,
Yeah.
because super rich, absolutely, because super rich.
No, complete your point, complete your point.
No, practically, you are right, because super rich constitutes a very minor proportion of the population. In fact, the tax paying community is a very small proportion of the population, and within that super rich, those who are earning beyond 2 crore and those who are earning beyond 5 crore constitutes a minuscule proportion of the population. To that extent, it is practically and politically more feasible, and it is a more populist measure. But if one has to look at long term rationalization of tax policy, there are things which are unpopular and which need to be considered, because then otherwise the alternative would be explored. And as you rightly said, that there are enough loopholes in the system which can be exploited, and there are enough ways to evade taxes.
Okay, Mr. Desai, coming back to the larger picture, and on FPIs, maybe there will be some kind of an explanation, maybe there won't, we'll have to wait and see.
If I may just make one point.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Let me make one point before we go into FPI issues. Number one, if we have been some of the highest tax paying people in the country, it is the duty of finance minister to call us and talk to us about the significant changes in the tax that are going to affect us. I wrote to Nirmala just when she took charge, that please do not bring any significant change in the income tax law in the budget. What we are doing, and this is a mistake we consistently have been doing, we have to change that old practice, separate income tax amendment from the budget presentation. Budget, you may just put concepts or directional thing, but when you try to bring in new proposals, suddenly in the budget, in 25 days time, Parliament says, yeah, and everybody passes, the legislation is passed. What happens? There is no interaction. There are issues and there are issues. It is not as simple as that.
Okay.
For example, you bring inheritance tax, okay?
I mean,
and you say everything will be taxed at the rate of 80%. We don't know what the rate would be. One house is there. Now, would you be exempting the house? Our children have to sell out the house. What is the value you are going to put? There are a lot of issues. I have handled estate tax matters, and I know they were up to 80%. We had income tax act going to 97.5%. That was also justified at one point of time. 97.5% tax, 70-71. So first duty of the government is, if you want to respect us, please call us in person or respect us and talk to us, and then we will discuss. We are fair enough. We are not here just to and it's complete myth that everybody is using loopholes.
With all due respect, Mr. Desai,
there are people who are straightforward. There is no need.
No, but with all due respect, Mr. Desai,
some myth here.
Yeah, a lot of people watching would be asking, why should the super rich get this special invitation to discuss before taxes are imposed on them? We all don't know what's going to hit us next. No one asked us before petrol and diesel cess is going to.
Stakeholders. I am calling. No. This question was in reference to super rich. That is why. I am saying every stakeholder has a right of representation to the government.
Absolutely.
And number two, bringing this income tax changes in the budget is a bad practice. It has gone badly drafted, hurriedly brought in, ill-conceived at times.
Yes.
Yes. So it is better to have them properly discussed
Okay.
and then bring the law.
Okay,
And that's why you are
Madhavan wants to
suffering
come in
all,
with-
every time.
Yeah, Madhavan
Today
wants to
market
come in
has
with a
gone
quick
down.
point. Yes, yes, Madhavan.
Let's also take a look at the bigger picture, Tamanna. We need to understand that this is a country in which this government, in its own previous avatar and Modi 1.0, talked about shell companies after demonetization. We have investment companies, shell companies, charitable and religious trusts and other forms of organizations. So there is plenty of scope for loopholes for those who want to avoid tax or evade tax. And people are, fat cats get away with a lot of things apart from the gross abuse of limited liability companies, which I think is a scandal in India, because everybody doesn't have that, understand there is a corporate morality. In this context, when you come in and introduce unacceptably high tax on individuals who may be working by the sweat of their brow, or more important, in India, we are an emerging brain power nation. And brain power follows a different set of rules. Intellectual property, even the Virat Kohlis or Rohit Sharmas of the world deserve a better deal if they are going to work hard to earn the money they do. So we need, I agree with Mr. Desai that the government needs to have a conversation with the taxpayers. I think there's nothing wrong in honoring the high taxpayers,
Yeah.
but I think it is very important to get an aggregate view of things.
Yes.
Just as the government has been cracking down on perks, it should also crack down on genuine loopholes and not use high value earners as whipping boys for
No,
this.
in fact, it's interesting you mentioned honoring, high taxpayers. The economic survey this year has proposed that those who consistently pay high taxes be given special benefits, different lines in airports, maybe roads and buildings named after them. So this is quite the opposite of it. Of course, you have to pay the tax first before the government will honor you. I want to thank all of you for joining us on the conversation this evening. And before we go, I just want to play out for you, this very question that I asked the CEO of the Niti Aayog, Amitabh Kant, on the day of the budget, where I asked him that if such few people are actually going to pay the super rich tax, was it more of a messaging? Let's listen to what he said.
The country is concerned about inequalities. The country is concerned about wide disparity. The country is concerned about taking everybody along. And the country is concerned about ensuring that we are able to put resources into areas where we require increased investments. I mean, when you have programs like education, health, nutrition, or aspirational district, you need to put large amount of resources into this. So super rich people can afford to spend a little bit, to contribute a little bit to this developmental process.
Well, it is a country with huge disparity, no doubt about it. The super rich should contribute more, no doubt about it. But are they feeling like they're the low-hanging fruit who are an easy target? That is still a matter of debate. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this evening.